The insane Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, has declared that Britain is ready for a worldwide conflict. The British government gets destroyed and massively scrutinised by the media over their mixed messaging. On the one hand, they say that the UK is ready. On the other hand, the latest report and review confirms that the armed forces are not even close to being prepared. And with the support of Emmanuel Macron in France, Downing Street in London once again threatens Vladimir Putin. Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 2CTV, your global news channel. I'm Maya Tusi, and this is the latest news update from the NATO alliance, specifically the British government. We've had a bit of a roller coaster over the last few hours in the UK. Earlier this morning, the Prime Minister made a huge speech listing the whole, additional improvements to the armed forces. Since then, we've had mixed signals because they realize it's a bit of a complicated issue. Because if you come out to say, we are going to be making improvements, we're not spending enough money on defense, then that means that you're currently not ready. So they said, no, well, we're actually ready. We're ready for war. We're ready for China and Russia and everybody. But then they said, yeah, but we're not actually ready. So we're going to go through all this. And the latest updates coming from the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. We're going to get your reaction in the live chat. Before we start, don't forget to download the 2CTV app. It's in the App Store on Apple and Android. You get access to everything that we have on that app. Now, first things first, Keir Starmer claims that Britain as a country is already ready, but needs a little bit of an improvement to the armed forces, in case obviously the conflict with Russia especially, and also in addition to that, if the Chinese get involved, then we're just going to need to make some tiny improvements. Now, there's a bit of an issue here in regards to the way the British government is sending out the narrative. So you can't really make a speech saying we're not ready, right? Because you're sending a message to the world that you're not ready. So they had to lie and say, well, we're actually very prepared. We've announced the coalition of the willing, which is basically the European version of NATO alongside Canada, right? But obviously the enemies of the West, they can look at it saying, are you ready? You're not even spending proper money on your defense compared to countries like the United States or Russia, right? Having said that, there has been a report that's now come out against the armed forces, the review that they've done, in a devastating outcome on the state of the UK defence. The Strategic Defence Review said that today's armed forces are not currently optimised for warfare, with inadequate stockpiles of weapons, poor recruitment, DEI recruitment, and low morale. So it's not necessarily that we're not spending enough money or the British government don't have enough personnel. That's not the only issue. The current equipment is not optimized. It's not ready for warfare. It's just there for show. The latest round of recruitment over the last few years, we don't really have a good caliber of soldiers because they decided to go with DEI hiring. And we don't even have enough stockpile. So how long can you actually last in any sort of conflict, a direct conflict with a big enemy? It's a big question, right? So I'm going to quickly read out what the Prime Minister is saying. The Prime Minister is saying, we're ready, Putin, we're coming for you with the help of the French, the Canadians. We don't care about the Americans, we're coming, right? On the other hand, this is the list of the things we have to do in Britain in order, before even thinking about attacking Russia directly. Increasing the size of the army by 3,000 soldiers to get to 76,000 troops. 76,000. That's all we have, by the way. That's in the next parliament, not even like tomorrow. There's a couple of points. 20% expansion in the volunteer reserve forces. But again, only when the funding is found. When they find some sort of money, right? But not until the 2030s. It's currently 2025. We're not even going to be close to be ready until the 2030s. Reviving a force of tens of thousands of veterans to fight in a crisis. So we're going to have to bring back the veterans. So we're gonna have to go to the veterans saying, you know, we asked you a number of times to join all the conflicts, and some of them might have been pointless conflicts. You know, some of them backfired, like Iraq. Can you come back? Because we got China and Russia to deal with. I'm not really sure how many of the veterans would say yes, but you know, we can at least ask. You know, you have to ask. The government also use they used to run this annual training, but they kind of stopped this. Now, embracing new technologies. They are going to be using AI, like China, robots and lasers. For the record, we don't have any of that. We're not going to have any of that for the next 10 years. But we're going to have AI, we're going to have robots and lasers. In the meantime, China already has full AI, armed forces, robots and lasers and everything else. Now, the British armed forces must also develop ways to defend against emerging threats. That includes biological weapons and everything else. Now, that's the actual the defense part of the armed forces, by the way. But then they say there's a possibility that the British government could buy warplanes that could carry American nuclear bombs to help NATO alliance's nuclear capabilities. So they're going to have to go beg the Americans to say, can we use some of your nuclear weapons? Just in case. We're doing it in the name of NATO. I'm not sure if the Americans would say yes. Why would they say yes? It's not really a good idea. There's also the expansion of the cadet forces of children by 30%. Yeah, we're going to get the children to get involved. Of course, we kind of lack in that area as well. China has a huge army when it comes to the cadet forces. Increasing the size of the army, obviously in terms of the 76,000 troops, we're going to have to wait for a very long time to get to that point. There's also going to be a new investment in long-range weapons and submarines. That also is not going to happen for another 10, 20 years. Meanwhile, apparently, Keir Starmer says we are ready with a coalition of the willing to fight Russia and also potentially China directly. How? If you don't have the Americans behind you, how? I think they're just relying on the fact that if something happens, Americans will have to get involved. That's the only thing that they are relying on. But by claiming that the British armed forces are ready, they're not ready. It's nonsense. Now, meanwhile, the latest update on the ground in Russia and Ukraine after the secret operation, the drone operation by Ukraine yesterday, traffic jams are now being reported across Russia because trucks have now been backed up for miles in a lot of the regions in Russia. All the lorries and trucks are now being checked by the FSB, the Federal Security Service, and the police, local police agencies. They are trying to find any potential drones or anything that's been smuggled by, from the enemies of Russia, from Ukraine or other places. Let's go to that video.
Короче, поселок Средний, там что-то перекрыли дорогу. Мы сейчас ехали практически по полям, реально прям скакали. Выехали опять на асфальт. Тут просто огроменная пробка из фур. Я не знаю, сколько это уже длится километров. Короче, жесть.
So yeah, there is a bit of a panic situation in Russia after the failure to identify all the drones that were smuggled in. Now, as I said yesterday, objectively speaking, that was a pretty impressive operation by Ukraine. We don't know exactly what sort of level of support they have from other countries and the Western allies. But having said that, Russia is now on top of all this. The problem with this is that today, the lunatics from both Russia and Ukraine met in Istanbul with absolutely no real objective. Now, both sides are refusing to move from their obvious red lines. So these negotiations are just buying more time. They have made some tiny achievements. Wounded soldiers are going to be exchanged. Ooh, impressive, right? But there's absolutely no leadership when it comes to these negotiations so far between Ukraine and Russia. You had Zelensky earlier on continuing obviously to attack, saying, well, without pressure, Putin will just keep playing games, right? And then the Russians obviously said that, we can't trust Zelensky. It's the same thing that's been said for the past 3 years, 4 years. It's just, it is getting tiring. But this is the mind games that both sides are playing. Let's first go to Zelensky, then we're going to go to the Russian delegate.
Today we see the situation clearly. If Russia turns the Istanbul meeting into an empty talk, there must be a new level of pressure, new sanctions, and not just from Europe. We need to work on joint sanctions at the G7 level, including with the United States and with everyone in the world who wants peace. It's very, very important that each of our partners supports this exact approach. Sanctions against Russia are necessary. It's important to seriously limit Russia's oil trade and its use of tankers. Sanctions, including secondary ones, tariffs and price caps, can work and push Russia toward peace. Without pressure, Putin will just keep playing games with everyone who wants this war to end.
The issue with this is that this tactic hasn't really worked. There has already been a lot of pressure on Russia. Compared to, for example, previous major conflicts, even with the Germans in the 1930s and 40s, or any other big conflict that you had. I mean, those were different, but the issue with this is that, imagine if at the time, the British Parliament was just going around saying, all right, the only way we're going to stop Hitler is, for example, to just put more sanctions on Germany. You got two options. If you are Ukraine, you got two options. One is, well, there are a number of options, but two obvious options. One, if a country is attacking you for whatever reason, right? If you have the capability, go and push them out and punish them. Now, it's not easy to do. Surprisingly, one country did manage to do that with limited capabilities. In 1981, 2 years after the Islamic occupiers took control of Iran, Saddam Hussein, that lunatic from Iraq, got a little bit overexcited, so he invaded Iran. Same thing happened. Firstly, that one went for 7 years. 7 years at the border. The Iraqis got some of the regions in the western parts of Iran. Then they got pushed out, back and forth around the border. At one point, the Iranians went into Iraq, got a little bit of it, came back out, counter-offense. Iran was supposed to lose because this was just after the 1979 revolution. The armed forces didn't exist, they didn't have the capabilities, and actually Saddam was getting supported by the West anyway, some of the Westerners. Somehow the Iranian regime managed to, what they used essentially was emotions. They got a lot of the young Iranian people saying, become martyrs, do it for your country, but also do it for Allah. And at the time, a lot of the young people fell for this. So the Iranians managed to actually stop Iraq from winning, right? And taking over. So that happened, but it's not an easy thing to do. You can't just say, well, Iran did it with Iraq, so Ukraine can definitely on its own do it with Russia, push them out. It's not easy. So that's one option. If you can, just go and kill your enemy. If you can't, there has to be some sort of negotiation. I mean, the third option is just surrender. That's a terrible idea. If you just surrender and give the whole of Ukraine to Russia, that's a different thing. But you have to have negotiations. And you can't just go and say, well, we just need more pressure, more sanctions. Russia are using third parties and black markets and the Eastern globalists to still operate when it comes to gas and oil contracts and everything else. They got the support from Iran, from China and all the other countries. They can continue to survive. Now, their economy is not in a great place, but it's still surviving. It's not going to completely fall, unless you can drag this for about 20 years, maybe. But both sides will be hammered economically and also political stability. So that tactic is going on. Now, Putin's delegate said that we now propose a limited ceasefire just to collect the dead bodies in hot weather. This is one of the achievements from today's negotiations, which is not really an achievement, apart from the wounded soldiers, which we're going to get to in a second.
We have transmitted our memorandum to the Ukrainian side, to the Turkish side. It contains 3 parts. First, how to achieve a true long-term settlement. And the second part is what steps can be made for a full ceasefire to be possible. And the second part allows for variance. Different paths can be taken. Memorandum is quite detailed, and the Ukrainian side decided to review it. After they review it, they will respond.
All right, well, the Russian delegates are focusing on their own thing, but we do have the confirmation of some tiny achievements. Top negotiators from both Ukraine and Russia confirmed that they have actually reached a tiny deal to swap all severely wounded soldiers as well as all the captured fighters under the age of 25. They said in a statement, "We agreed to exchange all for all seriously wounded and seriously sick prisoners of war. The secondary category is young soldiers who are from 18 to 25, all for all." So that is one achievement that happened today. The rest of it was just a waste of time, basically, because there was absolutely no leadership in the middle. We don't even know what the point of Turkey was in this. I mean, Istanbul hosting the meeting was a complete waste of time because they basically just acted as the location rather than any sort of leadership. I mean, nobody actually expects the Turkish government to be able to do a complicated mediator role in this. So that continued for no reason. But obviously, the tensions were massively high at the meeting. And so there was a short clip. You can see the Russian delegates, because of what happened yesterday, the last couple of days with the drone attacks, they look a little bit, let's just say, more than slightly upset. And I'm just going to show you the clip from the Russian delegates. Just have a look at their faces. Both sides. Well, firstly, by the way, it's a very cultural thing. Every time they used to have meetings with each other, both sides' faces are like bitch faces. It's just a cultural thing. But usually they try to be like more diplomatic. When the cameras are there, they're like, yes, well, let's just sit down. Nice to see you guys, the journalists and everybody. Are like, oh, hello, nice to see you again, Mr. Ukrainian, Mr. Russian. They didn't even bother this time. So that's happening. But let's quickly get some reaction on what you think about Keir Starmer's mixed messaging today. Aaron says, can Starmer be removed for being mentally ill? Unfortunately not. That's not how the role of the Prime Minister works and the scrutiny on that role. This is the other update, by the way. Part of the Ukrainian delegation today, when they turned up in Turkey, in Istanbul, they arrived in military uniform and with the negotiations with the Russians, and the journalists were a little bit confused because they didn't actually understand, because first they didn't see their faces. They were like, wait, hang on, which group is this? What, are they just random soldiers or generals coming in randomly? But that was just, again, everything is about PR with this conflict. It is a war of PR and narrative. That's rather than like exactly what's going on the ground. Mostly propaganda from both sides. Best Black says, Starmer can't even smash the gangs. He can't even control his own country. We don't even have enough soldiers who are capable, unfortunately. Ivan says, I think Starmer is deluded. Obviously too much white powder up his nose. The thing is, you forget, guys, Keir Starmer is not in charge. In Britain, it's the civil service that runs the show. It's the Foreign Office that runs the show. It's the Foreign Office linked to the palace, Buckingham Palace. They are the ones who run the show. The Prime Minister has just been given the piece of paper in advance. You read this. You say it out loud. Do it. And they're like, okay, fine. Ivan says, us veterans will give him the middle finger. Yeah, so if you join the live stream later, part of the plan from the Prime Minister in the UK is to now ask the veterans to come back. I wonder how many of them will be fit, like physically and mentally, because a lot of them have PTSDs, a lot of them have trauma from Iraq and Afghanistan and everything else, and physically as well, obviously, especially if they've been out of practice. I'm not sure, unless there is an actual crisis, how much this is going to be relatively good tactic. It says, after centuries of struggle, the English achieved a civilization of unparalleled security, decency, and fairness. Then they threw it all away. Yeah, also, in a very short space of time, let's not forget, the moment the British Empire technically ended. Now, I always have to say technically because the British Empire, compared to other empires, firstly, it didn't fall, unless you listen to your teachers in school. It didn't fall. It voluntarily decided to devolve itself, and it just rebranded itself. On the one hand, you have the Commonwealth. On the other hand, so you had a kind of happy exit. I mean, not all of it was a happy exit. I mean, the situation with India was a bit of a mess. But after the exit, after the relationship ended, there was a new relationship in the name of the Commonwealth. But that's not the only reason that the British Empire didn't fall or devolved, right? The British overseas territories right now, they are still basically part of the British Empire. We have British Empire without having a British Empire. And the Bank of England became the home of the whole wealth. So we moved from the British Empire to the Bank of England. Having said that, from that moment, but publicly, Britain was no longer the world police, and America became the world police. Everything fell apart slowly. I mean, the creation of the new governance, the politics of consensus, which was Clement Attlee, the Labour Prime Minister, who created the welfare state, and everything else since then, the 50s and 60s and 70s, with the exception of the 80s, and then 90s and 2000s and everything else, a complete downfall of the credibility of the United Kingdom on the international stage. We started to do self-destruction inside the country in the name of socialism, and internationally we had other problems because we didn't actually know what the role of Britain was supposed to be. So instead, the Foreign Office, with the help of the palace, decided to do this soft power thing. The soft power simply meant that Britain was still going to be active behind the scenes, while America is the face for the first few decades. And the Foreign Office did a lot of manipulations. We had the situations in Afghanistan with the Mujahideen. We had the situation in Iran in the 1970s, 79. It was with the help of the MI6 and CIA that the Shah of Iran fell apart and the Islamic occupiers took place. And then eventually America said, we don't actually need you. Then when America led, the globalists, including George W. Bush and everybody else, that made it even worse. So we went from, as this person said, British Empire, whatever you want to think of British Empire, it was competent, stability and competence. And then it ended. Then you had the Brits still doing it, running the show behind the scenes. Less good. Then the Americans actually took control, complete catastrophe. And now we're in this mess. So now the Europeans say, well, we have to run the show, but can we get the Americans to pay for it? Why would the Americans lead when the Europeans think that they are leading? It makes no sense. The Europeans want to take the whole credit. Random Adventure says, Commonwealth is just a fancy word. It doesn't provide Commonwealth country citizens anything different there from anyone else. Apart from the constitutional issues, obviously, especially for certain countries like Australia. Otherwise, yeah, there's not much in it. Especially since we joined the European Union, we completely abandoned the Commonwealth allies anyway. And since we left the EU, we haven't really done much to strengthen that relationship with the Commonwealth. Civil Defence UK says, Mr. Tusi, I do not know anyone that would go to war for Starmer. The man is a jellyfish. Well, I'm pretty sure. Lord Ali might. Lord Ali, the Labour Party donor. I don't think he's going to go to war either. It's too camp. Trooper says British tax into globalists' pockets and reduce the white British working class men. Well, they're going to ask the British working class men to then join the army. Now they're going to need them, right? Now they're going to need them to go and sacrifice their life. John says the UK stands with Ukraine. That's what Starmer said. Is this just a ploy to get rid of our toxic straight white males and reduce homelessness by rounding up veterans? That's literally what I said as well. Yeah, I mean, it's not, but that's just the... it's a bit of a bonus when it comes to the state. Because there's a bit of the way that the British state would look at it, they say that it's a bit of a burden. They see everything as a burden. So they see pensioners as a burden, because they have to pay for them now, even though the pensioners, a lot of them already paid a lot of taxes into the system over the years. But they're a bit of a burden. They live longer. It's not good. That's what they say. They also see the veterans, especially those who are homeless, as a burden. They could have helped them, but they didn't. And obviously white men, white straight men, that's a bit of a burden as well. So let's just get them to do something else. Kazan says, Sel wants peace. Really? Yeah. Well, we still don't know. Everyone's waiting. Both sides' narrative is still the same, which is really weird. Can those ready for World War III get started and others wait? Well, yeah. I think that's what Starmer and Mark Carney and Keir Starmer were saying, especially just before Carney came, when Starmer was talking about the coalition of the willing. They made it sound like this sentence. Well, we are going to get ready if the US is not going to get ready. But when they say we, they don't mean they. They don't mean Starmer and Macron themselves and now Carney. They're speaking on behalf of their population. Like, our people are ready. Are you sure they're ready? I'm not sure. I mean, a lot of people, all these kids are good at Call of Duty. I don't think they'll be necessarily that good in actual warfare. There hasn't been any training. What do you expect from them? Zelensky is a puppet sending his people to death. Ivan also says all the talks sound like a bluster and time wasting. It is. It's embarrassing at this point. We talk about all the other negotiations like Iran and the US and everything else, Israel and Hamas. This one is complete. It's just stupid. The whole thing is stupid. I can now defend the US and Iran negotiations over this one. Now that says a lot, because you can't negotiate with terrorists. Jeff says, Starmer has gone off the deep end. It's not even him. Kirka says, Maya Tusi, I am an old Russian guy. I know problem with Putler, that's Hitler and Putin. I love that. The regime is that they are very much the same as the Iranian regime. Well, there are tiny differences. You cannot make agreements and expect they will not break it up at any point. Well, for the two different reasons. The Russians' mentality, even since the late 90s, is just that deep level of distrust, right? And because inside the regime, they can't trust themselves. They can't trust each other. And then they can't trust the West. That's been just culturally speaking, even since the days of the Tsars. It's been the same thing. The Iranian regime, that's a whole different thing. It's the Iranian regime, they don't hold to their promises. It's not because they have distrust issues, they have trust issues. It's because they were never going to do it in the first place, and they always have their own agenda in the first place. But the relationship between Russia, culturally speaking, and Russian establishments, culturally speaking, and the West is just been a number of ups and downs between both sides over the last 100 years. Well, more than 100 years, just before the communist revolution. But the Iranian regime, they're just a terrorist state. They just do what they want to do. They just wing it as well. That's the problem with the Iranian regime. They have no plan properly themselves. Catherine says, let's go back to Pearl Harbor. What was the outcome there? Not one nuke, but two. This is not looking too good, not by a long shot. But the whole point of that was supposed to be a couple of bombs to end all of them, but didn't go too well, did it? Coppercat says, can we just surrender him and be done with him? Which one? Starmer? So Yuval says, send every Muslim immigrant. We might be blamed for thinking you use war to shift the demographics further. The thing is, a lot of people say, well, first things first, this is the whole DEI hiring, which hasn't gone down well. If people say there is a solution some people have when it comes to the mass migration and multiculturalism problem in Britain, they say, well, let's get all these migrants, especially the Islamic migrants, to join the army. Are you sure you want to do that? You want to give them guns? Also, you expect them to actually be loyal enough to, I mean, I know I'm stereotyping, but I'm primarily talking about those who are, those Islamic migrants who are clearly anti-West and anti-Britain, and they're just here to take advantage, right? Not the ones who try to integrate. You really expect them to actually not compromise the whole system. So it's a lose-lose situation, because if you then get the white Brits, the natives, the Anglo-Saxons who do it, then they're going to get angry, saying, well, what am I fighting for now? Firstly, I feel like I'm fighting for this Prime Minister, even though you're technically fighting for the Crown, on behalf of the Crown. Also, that's the other problem. A lot of people say, for Charles, really? But then they say, well, so wait, you want us to go to war, the natives, while everybody else are at home taking the benefits. So it is a lose-lose situation. And actually, realistically, I actually feel sorry for the Defense Department, the Minister of Defense, and actually any Prime Minister right now in Britain. There is no good solution, because these guys have created a wider, deeper problem over the last few decades, couple of decades. Now it's a lose-lose. Whatever you do, it's not going to, unless you actually address the real problem. Mass deportations. That's just the first thing, by the way. Another super chat from Israel. Any news about the US and Iran? I heard that Iran will refuse the deal. Will the US attack like they said they will? So yes, as far as we know, over the last few hours, we have getting updates that the Iranians will be rejecting the latest proposal. We just actually got an update. That was speaking of the devil. And by devil, I mean the IRGC. The American proposal for the nuclear agreement allows Iran to enrich uranium at low level, and does not include a complete dismantling of the nuclear facilities. Okay, so this isn't good. This definitely is not good, ladies and gentlemen, which means this is after the update we had a few hours ago, which was the Iranian regime were getting ready to reject it. So now the Americans will allow Iran to enrich a bit of uranium like Obama did. The problem here is that I can easily see that the Iranian regime could come back and reject it, the first draft, instead of being desperate to say, "Oh yes, thank you, let's sign it," because now they're gonna try and have the upper hand. Now that they've got what they wanted from the Americans, which is enriching a bit of uranium as opposed to dismantling the nuclear program, they might actually reject the first draft tonight or tomorrow, and then they will agree to it anyway within the next few days or week. So if this is true, then the Iranian regime might have just been saved by Steve Witkoff. We'll find out more later. Where is Churchill when we need him? It's not Starmer. Nope, definitely not. Draft 1 million men who have recently arrived. See, that's the problem. I said you can't really do that. You have a bunch of North African, Middle Eastern Islamists giving them guns. Yeah, guess what happens? I think we're on the cusp of a guerrilla warfare, and that gets very, very messy fast. Just my opinion, the Russians will nuke Britain. People have been saying that since 1999. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we'll keep you guys posted on this and all the other matters. Subscribe to the channel, download the 2CTV app to get up to date with everything else that we do. I'm Maya 2C, and we are the media.